Welcome to Elf in Space. This time we are taking a closer look at what's going on around us. Our land, our air, our water, our environment. Everything we do can change our environment. And we can get a pretty good view of these changes from space.
Our wonderful world and precious environment are changing rapidly. Human activity, tectonic plate movement, and natural disasters all change the face of our planet and the levels of gases and water in our environment. These changes can have massive and sometimes deadly consequences, which impact everyone. Space exploration can not only reveal changes as they happen, help warn those on Earth, but experiments carried out in space can help us to understand life on Earth better. Planets like Mars were once flowing with water and were much more similar to our planet than they are now. How and why they changed can help us better understand and prepare for environmental changes. Lucy Easthope is a UK expert and advisor on emergency planning and disaster recovery. She explains to us how space has an important impact on her work.
Our planet has always suffered from disasters and huge changes in climate, and we're very aware that we're going through some big climate changes at the moment. Up from space, and particularly in the data and the information we get from the International Space Station, we can spot changes in temperature, monitor seas, and we're basically able to monitor the disasters as they unfold. The type of information that we now get in disasters is unlike anything we've had before. And to do that, we often use satellites. We particularly use the International Space Station information to help inform us in disaster. As you probably already know, we've captured images of Earth for hundreds of years now. The first photography to capture images of the land was in 1858. And the first satellite was put in almost 100 years ago. What we need to do is use the images and the information we're getting to help us with weather forecasting, disaster response, and climate science. So that's where I'm looking at the information for. Scientists use the information from the space station to tell us things about cloud, wind, temperatures, and water vapor in the air. And we can even detect tsunamis by monitoring for atmospheric and land changes that cause events. We can also see data from earthquakes and volcanoes. Satellites deploy a range of sensors. We use optical imagery, so we see pictures, but we also have infrared sensors that detect temperature and atmospheric conditions. This is particularly important for things like forest fires, storms, and hurricanes. But also, what's really important sometimes is what disaster planners need when the disaster happens is what's called an impact assessment. And the information from the satellite sensors can be really important at that point, telling us what's changed on the ground. And something called synthetic aperture radar can create precise maps of the Earth's surface and detect changes after things like earthquakes. So this information becomes really important for us in carrying work out on the ground. By having a network of satellites, we can see exactly what's going on the ground. And one of the things that's important for disaster response is for this to be a global initiative. So actually we have what's called the International Charter for Space and Major Disasters. And this is over 24 years old now. And this allows all 17 space agencies and satellite operators to provide the satellite data for the monitoring, warning, and impact of disasters to the country who are going through the disaster. And the commitment is to provide that data as fast as possible. How many times have we activated that? Well, to date, we've activated over 807 times. We've activated it for oil spills, for tropical cyclones, for landslides, for flooding, and for earthquakes. It's becoming more and more known that the advanced sensors in the satellites allow for us to do better warning and detection. This means that as a disaster planner, I can move responders about, I can position resources where they'll be needed, and I can reduce the time it might take to respond. Then, when the disaster happens, we use the satellite images to allow for what we call situational awareness. That's things like, tell me about the scale of the disaster. Tell me the parts of the country that have been affected. Tell me the scale of the loss. Another thing that will change is that artificial intelligence will allow for greater capacity to process the amount of data and images produced by satellites. At the moment, it can easily be overwhelming. So in the future, we hope that the way that we monitor and manage that will help get what we need from that data quicker. So that's the artificial intelligence world meets the satellite. Satellites are huge, but we're seeing them being built smaller and the technology is becoming more compact. This allows for reduced costs in the building, for launching and operating satellites, as well as mega constellations, which allow for better coverage. Advancements in satellite-to-satellite comms and more intelligent ground control will allow us to work better with both responders and affected communities in disasters. So thinking about the United Arab Emirates, you've got a lot of use of space data because you're a very changing part of the world. You've got a lot of fast development in your urban areas. And although it's a bit of a myth that we can see the Great Wall of China from space, we can see development and change within urban areas. So one of the things that space data will be very important for you going forward, and maybe you'll work in this area, is the changing nature of the risks in the United Arab Emirates. And one thing you've seen recently, for example, is flooding. Often it's quite encouraging to move people to different areas of the town or the city because it suits the needs of a growing urban area. But that can change the nature of the risk that communities face. So the space data can be really important in telling us what risks are going to happen, when to plan for them, plan for how to put resources in to support people. You're not an area that traditionally sees large amounts of flooding. So sometimes what we see is it can take a community by surprise. And that's exactly where disaster planners come in. And that's what I mean about having them all around the world. We think about these things all the time. It's a great career for people who like to plan, for people who like to move things about. So we often do our planning with Lego. Would you believe it? We move Lego models about. It's not all high-tech science and satellites. And it's a great career for people who are interested in things like geography and how communities live. So what we call sociology. If you get to know anything about my work, it's not depressing or worrying at all. It's always about how people and communities come back from these things. So the better data we have and the better ways to talk to each other, the more exciting and more compassionate the response can be.
Next time on Elephant Space, I'm going to show you how we find our way in space. There's no Google Maps up here, so we have to use a different way. How did your grandparents and great-grandparents find their way? See you next time.
Now it's your turn. Follow us on Elephant Space and find out this week's activity. Don't forget to share everything space with us.